Hello and welcome everybody to the Nuremberg International Human Rights Film Festival Summer Lounge, or our little check-in with our festival colleagues from around the world. We have this little series of talks on a more or less regular basis until our festival starts on September 29th. So if you want, please come back to our YouTube channel and see what else is there and who else we'll talk to. Today my guest is Leni Velasco from Vista Human Rights Film Festival from the Philippines, and I'm so happy that you're here. Welcome, Leni.
Hello, welcome. Thank you for having me.
It's wonderful that we actually get time to talk because we only met once in person, I think.
Yes.
We were brought together by a friend of ours, Moira Lang, from a producer from the Philippines, who was our guest here in Nuremberg, and then I think told you that you should meet me, and that's how we got to know each other. And I've been following the work of Vista since then, and I admire you guys very much for the work that you do, and this is what I would like to talk with you about. Leni, maybe at the beginning you could just give us a framework, because there's Vista, that's the name of the film festival, but Vista, if I understand, is an initiative of an organization with the coolest name ever. It's called Dakila, Philippine Collective for Modern Heroism.
Yes. Dakila is actually nobility in English. So we're a collective for modern heroism. We're an artist activist collective. So we started 15 years ago, more than 15 years ago, and Activista as a film festival was one of our very first projects.
And you're also working for the film festival, right? So it's
Yes.
it's something that you do. Can you give us maybe a little bit of an idea what Vista does? Because it's a very active film festival. It's not so much just what we do here in Nuremberg, very lazily, just screening films in the cinema, but there's a whole range of activities. So what is Vista?
So Activista, actually the name is a play on the word activist. So it's the Filipino word for activist, activista. We started really as a film festival, as one of the projects of Dakila. But after many years, we realized, especially when we had our new president, that we need to do more than just a human rights festival, but really engage in human rights education work as an NGO. So we kind of shifted from just being a festival to a non-government organization working on human rights education, but still very much using the arts, media, and popular culture in the work that we do.
How I'm interested in this outreach part. Can you give us an example of what would you do? I'm assuming you're not just staying in Manila, but you're actually going, or you told me once, you're going places and you're taking all the equipment with you. What do you do in other places than Manila?
So that experience actually started when we were doing the traveling film festivals. So we started this like all women, carrying all those tarpaulins and projectors, doing screenings in schools and communities. And Philippines is an island, so imagine how many cities we have to go to be able to do that. But later on, we're not just doing film screenings with forums, but we started doing trainings, workshops on films, leadership, human rights, democratic governance, and all those stuff related to our advocacy as an organization.
That's quite amazing. I mean, I always have this image in my mind of you packing all this equipment and basically traveling through the islands by boat, I'm assuming. So that must be quite stressful.
But it was fun. We miss those days that we can go in every city and just be with filmmaker friends, bring them in the islands.
I'd also like to talk with you about the situation that you're working in, because right now, in Europe at least, the view or the perspective on the Philippines has darkened somewhat. There is a perspective that the actual president is not very strong on human rights, if I can say that. Extra legal killings, the imprisonment of so many people. So it's a very critical view on the actual government right now. it sounds like this kind of government would not be very welcoming to the kind of work that you do. How is that for you?
Exactly.
Has it changed? Has work gotten more difficult, or do you just work on different issues?
Um, don't you know that the Philippines is still at war? That's a running joke among human rights organizations. Because remember, when our president started his term, his first move was to declare a war against those drug users, or what we call popularly known as the war on drugs, wherein those extrajudicial killings worsened. Later on, he declared another war against activists, against communists, or what he um, tagged as terrorists. And there's the war against those vocal in the opposition, in the political opposition. And the funniest thing is that when the pandemic hit last year, he declared a war against the virus. So we're still at war every day here in the Philippines. So that's how it is all being framed. This is a war narrative that has been going on in the Philippines by this populist playbook that's being implemented by our government.
Has it made? I mean, it's maybe a stupid question, but has it made your work harder? Is it more difficult for you to reach people? I mean, if you're the enemy of the people, or framed as that, that must be difficult for also a film festival that is seeking an audience, is seeking public. So, a film festival specifically is not something that happens underground, more or less by definition. It seeks to be out in the open. How does that work?
It has been an uphill climb for most human rights activists, especially artists and filmmakers here in the Philippines. I remember 2 years ago, there was this absurd press release by the Philippine military saying that film festivals and film screenings are the Trojan horse of communist recruitment in schools. But that's the work that we do as a film festival. So we've been going to schools, and suddenly there's this conspiracy theory that the filmmakers and these film festivals are front of recruitments of terrorists and activists. So it has been a, wor- a worst past 3 years or 4 years with us, especially among the film community here in the Philippines. We're very lucky, though, that the film community here is quite vigilant in upholding their rights, especially in to free expression. So I think that's where we're getting our strength to really pursue the work that we do, because we do have a strong film community that's been trying to resist all these attacks and threats to their rights and freedoms.
And do you feel that the propaganda that you're all just trying to recruit for the enemy, does that affect the way you can work in schools? Does that have an effect on the people who book you, or that would normally let you in or invite you in? Do you see a change in that?
Definitely. For one, because people are scared here in the Philippines. Just if you invite somebody who's known as a progressive or an activist or an opposition, it's not surprising that you will be tagged as a as somebody who harbors terrorism or supports these conspiracy theories that there's a movement to oust the president and everything. It has become hard for us. More schools that we work with have been very careful into welcoming us to their schools. It has created a real atmosphere of fear in the country. It has this chilling effect, not only to the groups that we work with, but especially to our audiences as well, because they wouldn't want to be caught going to a film screening that was tagged as something that's anti-government.
Uh, so has it also influenced or changed the kind of films that you screen? Or especially in the outreach and educational programs, what kind of films or what kind of issues do you highlight?
Uh, I guess that's the part that we need to balance. At the same time, I think that's where creative resistance really comes in. The creativity. We're very glad that we're an artist collective. So we kind of use our creativity, our art as our Trojan horse to also defend ourselves, so that it's kind of like a subtle resistance. It's not really directly confrontational, but through art, through creativity, we're able to make it our Trojan horse, so not to be able to be very vulnerable to this red tagging and to the attacks of the government. But I guess it's really is hard because we always have to find a balance whether we would pursue screening this very important film, or we would protect ourselves and just try to screen it not as publicly as possible. Because I remember that was our very main struggle when we opened our festival with the On the President's Orders. So that was the first film ever made on the drug war, and it was a full house screening, I guess, to 1,000 audience at a university theater. But we really had to call friends, lawyers, allies, just so that we could protect the whole screening. And there were some of the subjects of the documentary were there, so we had to really call up some protection from the Commission on Human Rights just to make sure that everybody is protected. We had to really have our links with the human rights community just so that everyone will be aware. There's legal support and everything else. But we had to screen that film because it was a very important film for the Philippines. It was the first documentary on the drug war.
When you say you have to protect your everybody basically at the screening, but also the protagonists and stuff, what exactly does it mean? You have people on standby if things go wrong, or are there more things, more steps that you take, if you can talk about them, but to understand the kind of conditions? I mean, you have 1,000 people in the audience. That's huge. That also
It
means
is.
you cannot you certainly cannot control the audience, right? You don't know exactly who's in. It's different from a 30 people community screening. It becomes uncontrollable to some extent. So how do you do that?
We had to vet everyone who's attending the screening. So it has to be by invitation, by registration. It has to be vetted by partner organizations or schools. Second, I think a day before or 2 days before the premiere, we were on the front page of the broadest newspaper in the country because the presidential spokesperson made a statement about the film. Um, we wanted that buzz because we wanted to spotlight the issue of the war on drugs. But at the same time, we have to balance what will happen on the day, if they will stop the screening. We had to talk to the university who's hosting the screening. We're lucky that the whole university administration were quite supportive of the issue of the initiative. So we had to go through all that logistical and coordination work just to ensure that there will be a safe and smooth screening of the film. But I guess that's also what we want, right? Because we wanted it to be something that people can talk about.
You talked before about your connection or your network within the film community in the Philippines, and maybe you could talk also a little bit about that, because over the years we've seen so many fantastic and strong films from the Philippines internationally on all the big film festivals. I mean, for us, one of our important directors is certainly Love Diaz, who has been invited to our festival over and over again and has won our main award with Norte, The End of History. How do you collaborate, or what does solidarity mean in that context? You have high professional filmmakers, super successful industry, and then a human rights film festival. I think in many places the connection is not that strong. There's the film people and there's the human rights people, or human rights film festival people are probably a bit more towards the human rights people in most cases. How are you intertwined, and how does it work?
That's the magic that we don't even figure out why. But I guess in front of the human rights community, because we're both connected to both human rights community and to the film community, I guess the human rights community, they see us as artists. From the film community perspective, they see us as activists. And I guess that's a balance that works with us. Um, in the beginning, they see us as separate from them, but I guess what forged that strong ties is the relationship building that we've done over the years. Because remember, most of the those in the mainstream filmmaking community also started from the independent film community, and we have been supporting the independent film community when we started the festival. So these are the filmmakers, the actors that we bring in schools. I guess their experience through the festival also gave them more insights on the work that we do. And I guess the osmosis or the collaboration works because we're able to understand better each other.
Uh, that sounds fantastic. I wish this would happen more in the world. To have this kind of community that stands up for each other, basically. And you also bringing those people up with you in the Human Rights Film Festival, and then they make it on a big stage and are still connected to you.
I guess because we're all also part of the community as well. We're not isolated from the film community. Our members are also filmmakers, film producers. So I remember when there's this big issue of about film industry workers and the mainstream film festival. We were there supporting their stand on the issue, their rights as film workers. So I guess that's where the ties are strengthened because we see each other as part of the community, not really um, outside the whole arts community.
Leni, one question I have to ask you. We're all living in a global pandemic we have been living in the past 1.5 years, basically. How does that affect the Philippines, maybe in general? Because we see more and more news that the situation is very worrying. It's in a critical stage in the Philippines. How's the situation as such? And how does it affect you in your work, both as a film festival, but also in the activist activities that you do?
A day ago, I think we reached the highest so far recorded for a day. We had 23,000 cases. So that's really worrisome. And the fact that the vaccination rollout here in the Philippines is not that efficient yet. So everybody's like on a lockdown, even though they're lifting some restrictions, but because of the high cases, you would see streets being locked down. In fact, I think 8 of my colleagues have been affected. So it's really taking a toll on the work that we do, especially now when we're in the middle of the festival preparations. We wanted to package or present the festival to reclaim also, despite the pandemic, but as a way to reclaim also our spaces of freedom. That it doesn't mean that we're on a lockdown in a pandemic. We need to be restricted as well in all our spaces where we can move, whether you're an artist or a human rights defender. I guess that's the strong message that we wanted to really banner in our festival, that despite the hardships of the pandemic, it doesn't mean that the state or the government can restrict our rights or limit our civic spaces, because that's what's have been happening in the Philippines. We responded with the health crisis through a very militaristic approach rather than really build on and strengthen our public health system. It's kind of militaristic. It has restricted our civic spaces, and we wanted the festival to banner the message that we need to reclaim our spaces of freedom, metaphorically and literally. We have to have good policies and programs to address this situation.
We have your festival really coming up even before ours. So maybe just to switch the perspectives to the upcoming festival, when exactly does it start and what will you do? Can you reclaim those spaces, or do you have to be online, or what are your activities, and what maybe are the highlights of your program? Because maybe we can also use the space to advertise a little bit for Active Vista.
Sure. So we're starting on September 21. That's a very important date in the Philippines. It's the anniversary of the commemoration of the anniversary of the martial law in the Philippines. Incidentally, it's our 49th commemoration, and next year will be the 50th year of martial law anniversary in the Philippines. That's why it's very important. And bear in mind, we're also going to our election year next year. So much is at stake in the Philippine context nowadays. So as much as this is our situation, it's kind of morbid and helpless and hopeless in the Philippines. The festival actually hopes to be more hopeful and encouraging that everything in the new normal can be better if we do elect the right leaders in our next elections, and if we do not stop fighting for our rights. So we wanted it to be more festive. So there will be film screenings, but we're doing it online. We're hoping to do some hybrid. I think some of the areas in the countries can do small screenings in galleries, hopefully by the beach or under the stars. But we're really very careful because of the high COVID cases now. So we're still trying to decide and playing it by ear. There will be a lot of festival events as well, mostly online, but we're trying to move away from all those Zoom-like presentation of things. We'll have a lot of exhibitions. And this year we'll be having a tribute to Love Diaz, actually, for being in the forefront of narrative storytelling in the Philippines. So yeah.
That's wonderful. Wonderful. We also will have the latest Love DS film in our program. So just to, or the latest that we know of is Genos Pan. I'm not even trying to pronounce the Tagalog. I don't. But yeah, that's a wonderful retrospective or case study, I guess. Will he be with you at the festival?
I don't think so, but we're definitely screening 3 of his latest films. So that's something that we're all looking forward to because it hasn't been screened that much in the Philippines because of the pandemic. And all his films have been relevant to the narratives of the Filipino people. So that's why it's very important to us.
And what do you expect? That in terms maybe of impact, what do you expect will happen with the festival? Do you hope for large audience numbers? I mean, there's always this debate. If you go online, theoretically, there's more people who will be able to join, but you need technology, you need all those kinds to even participate.
Yes.
So how do you expect it to go? Do you have any idea?
Last year when we did our festival online, it was the first year that we did it online. It was so like full pack that we literally had no time to breathe because we tried to do everything in 10 days, but we realized now because of all the online fatigue as well, we want to be chill this time. So it's gonna run for 3 weeks, and it's we're trying to make it more chill and not really as anxious feeling as what we did last year with a full pack program. I guess it's also in consideration of the mental space of everyone, not to be bombarded by so much noise online.
And do you have any predictions, or are there any predictions how the elections will go next year? Is there a tendency to be seen?
Actually, we're programming the festival on the week that candidates will be filing their candidacy for the election. So that will cover the festival. Mm-hmm. So we hope that's one of the important discussions in the festival, because we will know by then, as we end the festival, who will run for presidency in the next year. So I guess there will be a lot of conversations on democracy and the elections, and human rights as one of the major issues.
Leni, that just sounds fantastic for the entire festival. We wish you all the best and all the luck with the festival. I hope it works splendidly. I also hope that we run into each other again soon somewhere in the world. I mean, right now with travel restrictions, we have the privilege of meeting like this, face to face, and more in recent weeks than we ever did before. But
Yes.
I hope we'll come back to a time and to a social space where we can actually share a room together and see each other in person. Before we go, I would just like to invite everybody to check out, of course, Active Vista on the Philippines. You find them easily on the website. Check out, if you can, the online program, Active Vista. And once you've warmed up at Active Vista, you might slowly also get into view the Nuremberg International Human Rights Film Festival, because that will start on September 29. We also have an online arm if you're based in Germany, because it's geo-blocked, as so many things are. But everybody can follow all our Q&As with all our guests online. They will be live streamed, and they will also be put on our YouTube channel. So this is the little advertisement thing. I was told on YouTube, if you just click on the little bell, you will get notifications when we have the next live stream coming up. So do that and broaden our base. Leni, thank you so much again for being with us today, and all the best for your festival, and say hi to everybody at Daquila and everybody in the film community. Hope to see you again soon.
It's my pleasure, and good luck to your festival as well.
Thank you. Bye-bye, Leni. Thank you. And bye-bye, you everybody at home.